Japanese doctor reveals the only leaf that can destroy diabetes and cholesterol at the same time. What if the answer you've been looking for is closer than you think? A forgotten plant, a simple ritual, a quiet habit. The power of healing might be hiding in what seems small, what your body tries to say, and what you've never heard. Why so many get sick in silence, and why some few manage to reverse their fate. In this episode, a Japanese doctor breaks the silence and shares a discovery that challenged modern medicine. Get ready to see with new eyes what you put on your plate and what you cultivate in your life. So welcome to another episode of Heal Essence, where you will discover the only leaf that can destroy diabetes and cholesterol at the same time. Dr. Haruki, let's start from the beginning. Diabetes and high cholesterol. Two words we hear so often, but that still cause a lot of confusion. Many people don't even realize that these two conditions go hand in hand, and that many times they are silent for a long time. I'd like you to start by explaining how these diseases affect the body, even when the person doesn't feel anything yet.
You're right, and that's one of the big traps of these diseases. Both type 2 diabetes and high cholesterol are slow, chronic, and silent processes. For years, the body adapts to excess sugar in the blood and circulating fat until the damage appears, and usually in a serious way, like heart attack, stroke, or kidney failure. It's as if the body is screaming for help, but the person doesn't hear because the symptoms are almost invisible.
And that's very dangerous, right? Because the person only finds out they had diabetes or high cholesterol when they've already had some complication. I myself have met people who only discovered they had both after a heart attack.
Unfortunately, it's very common. What many people don't know is that there's a very close relationship between these two conditions. Excess glucose in the blood harms blood vessels, inflames the body, and favors the buildup of fatty plaques in the arteries. Meanwhile, the bad cholesterol, the famous oxidized LDL, speeds up this inflammatory process. In other words, one feeds the other. When they go together, the damage multiplies.
It's almost like a toxic marriage, right? One problem pulls the other, and the body accumulates damage inside. And when we say the impact is silent, what are we talking about? Diseases in the kidneys, heart, brain?
Exactly. Diabetes and high cholesterol affect circulation as a whole. The blood stops flowing efficiently, vessels become stiffer and clogged. This can cause everything from erectile dysfunction to blindness. It can compromise memory, cause leg pain, tingling, hard-to-heal infections, and of course, the most serious events like heart attack and stroke. All of this many times without any apparent sign before the collapse.
It's scary to think that something so serious can be happening in our body without any clear warning. And do you see this a lot in your patients? Someone who comes with a complaint, and when you check, they have a full picture of metabolic disorder?
Frequently. I usually say the body gives signals, but they are subtle. Constant tiredness, excessive thirst, abdominal weight gain, high blood pressure. These are warnings many people ignore. And unfortunately, many times the person only changes lifestyle after a big scare. That's why prevention, a holistic look at the body, is so important.
And in that prevention, lifestyle counts, right? Diet, exercise, sleep. But there's a part you strongly defend, which is the use of medicinal plants. We will talk more about that ahead, but I can already say a lot of people are curious about the so-called leaf you revealed.
Laughs. Yes. We'll get there. But it's fundamental to first understand the ground this leaf acts on. If the body is inflamed, intoxicated, lifeless, no plant works miracles. But when we prepare the body, rebalance habits, and introduce natural elements intelligently, the results are impressive. We'll build that path together along the conversation.
Dr. Haruki, if there's one thing I see happening often, it's this. Many elderly people live for years with subtle symptoms like tiredness, mild dizziness, failing memory, and think all this is normal for their age. But many times behind these signs is precisely diabetes or high cholesterol. Why does this happen so much in this phase of life?
You touched on a very important point. Over the years, the body naturally goes through a series of metabolic changes. Insulin production decreases, the liver processes fat less efficiently, cell sensitivity to glucose falls. So, the body becomes more vulnerable. But these processes are silent and progressive. Because the symptoms are mild in the beginning, they end up being attributed to aging, not to a specific clinical condition.
And then the problem ends up treated with patchwork, right? One pill for blood pressure, another for sleep, one more for muscle pain. And no one investigates the real cause of that chronic tiredness, for example.
Exactly. That's the trap of polypharmacy. The elderly start taking medications to treat isolated symptoms: pain, insomnia, anxiety, dizziness. But no one looks at the system as a whole. Often, what's behind everything is blood sugar or lipid imbalance. And worse, some of those meds interfere negatively with metabolism, increasing insulin resistance or messing with cholesterol.
It's a kind of vicious cycle, right? The person feels discomfort, takes a medicine, the body reacts differently, they feel a new discomfort, and take more medicine, until, without realizing, they have tons of different diagnoses, but no clear explanation.
Exactly. And this phenomenon has a name: iatrogenesis. Diseases caused or worsened by medical treatments themselves. This happens a lot with the elderly, because their bodies have less ability to eliminate toxic substances. And when those substances accumulate, whether medications, sugars, fats, or food toxins, the body starts showing signs of failure, but slowly and silently.
Now, doctor, one thing that intrigues me is how many of these elderly really believe they have no serious health problems. They say, "Oh, my tests are fine. The doctor said it's just about controlling blood pressure." Is there also underreporting, like a kind of clinical blindness?
Yes, there is. Many conventional tests are not very sensitive to early metabolic changes. For example, a fasting glucose of 99 milligrams per deciliter can be considered normal, but already indicates increased risk. The same goes for cholesterol. The patient hears they're on the edge and thinks everything's fine. But this edge is exactly where the body starts to get sick silently. And if there's no change in course, the disease will settle.
And the worst is often the lack of guidance. No doctor who sits calmly, listens to the elderly, investigates family history, eating patterns, sleep, stress. Instead, what we see is a 5-minute appointment, prescription, and goodbye.
Unfortunately, that's the picture of the system. The elderly become a number, a chart with lab results. But no one asks what they eat for breakfast, if they sleep well, if they feel sad or confused. That's where traditional Japanese medicine makes a huge difference, because it assumes body and mind are connected. Disease doesn't start from a lab marker, but from a deeper imbalance, involving environment, habits, emotions.
That reminds me of our grandmothers who cared for health with teas, roots, compresses. There was a more holistic, intuitive view. And it seems we lost that, right?
It's true. Popular wisdom has a lot of value. Of course, not everything is scientific, but many of these practices had a basis because they respected the body's timing, the connection with nature. When an elderly person drank bitter leaf tea on an empty stomach or put clay on their feet, they were stimulating internal cleansing, rebalancing. Today we trade that for pills, but forget the body needs natural support, especially in old age.
So, what's missing isn't more medicine, but more awareness, more listening, more prevention. And maybe that's why so many people are looking for alternative, more natural paths. Paths like the one you're about to show soon, which starts with a simple but powerful leaf that's helped so many elderly regain control of their own bodies.
Exactly. And it's an honor to share this here, because, in the end, the goal is this: to give the elderly back the lead role in their own health, to show that even in advanced age, it's possible to reverse conditions, gain energy, reduce medications. And it all starts with knowledge and simple decisions that make all the difference.
Dr. Haruki, now I want to dive with you into a fascinating topic: traditional Japanese medicine. More and more, we hear about the benefits of Eastern practices, teas, bitter leaves, natural food. But for many people, it still seems like a mystery. What exactly is traditional Japanese medicine? And what makes it so special when it comes to metabolic health?
That's a great question. Traditional Japanese medicine, called Kampo, has very old roots, influenced by Chinese medicine but with its own characteristics. It looks at the body as an integrated system where each organ influences the others. The main idea is to restore balance between heat and cold, humidity and dryness, strength and weakness. And this is done through the use of medicinal herbs, dietary changes, breathing practices, and, above all, listening to the body.
That's interesting. It already starts differently from Western medicine, which focuses on symptoms. So if the person has high cholesterol, Western medicine goes straight to medication. In Kampo, treatment starts differently?
Yes, completely different. Instead of asking how to lower this cholesterol, the question is, why is the body accumulating fat in the blood? That leads us to investigate not only what the patient eats, but how they sleep, their digestion, if they feel cold in their extremities, if they sweat easily, if they're emotionally balanced. All of this influences how the whole body functions.
Sounds like a much more human approach, and more logical too, because we're not just a set of exams, right? We have emotions, habits, rhythms. All that affects the body.
Exactly. And one of the great strengths of Japanese medicine is the use of medicinal plants, not as a complement, but as the main treatment. Bitter leaves, for example, are widely used to regulate glucose and help digestion. Other herbs are specific for the liver, the spleen, the heart. The wisdom of these plants has been passed down through generations. And the most impressive, many of these traditional treatments are today being validated by modern scientific research.
That's incredible. Modern science now confirming what the Easterners have known for centuries. And do you feel there's resistance from the West to accept this more natural approach?
Unfortunately, yes. There's some prejudice against what they call alternative. But what we're talking about here is not quackery or blind belief. It's medicine with an empirical basis, with centuries of clinical observation, and now studied by respected universities. Japan, for example, has hospitals where Kampo is applied alongside conventional medicine, with excellent results.
And you, as a doctor, can you see the difference in your patients when they adopt Japanese medicine practices? Any remarkable case you can share?
I have many, but I remember a 72-year-old woman who came to the clinic with poorly controlled type 2 diabetes, sky-high cholesterol, and chronic joint pain. She was already taking 4 different medications. We started a treatment with a bitter medicinal leaf infusion, along with dietary changes inspired by traditional Japanese style, more vegetables, less white flour, digestive teas. In 3 months, she halved her medications. In 6 months, her tests normalized. And best of all, she felt alive, active, full of energy. It was emotional.
Wow, doctor, that's transformative. And shows that the health path doesn't have to be painful or full of meds. It needs listening, awareness, and the right leaves at the right time. Laughs.
Exactly. Japanese medicine teaches us that nature has powerful resources, and that the body, when respected, responds wisely. We don't need to live in fear of disease. We can live with clarity, with prevention, with simple, consistent actions. And yes, many times, a single leaf can make all the difference.
Dr. Haruki, now that we better understand what's behind these silent diseases and know a bit about your journey, I want to get practical, something that affects everyone's daily life. Let's talk breakfast. I bet a lot of people listening woke up today and ate bread with margarine, coffee with milk, maybe some box juice. What seems so innocent could be sabotaging their health, right?
You nailed it. Breakfast is one of the most neglected meals when it comes to metabolic health. And the problem isn't just skipping the meal. It's the kind of food consumed right after waking. The body comes from an overnight fast with sensitive hormone levels, especially cortisol and insulin. If the first thing in is a big load of refined carbs and sugar, that causes a glucose spike in the blood. That spike is followed by a sharp drop, and the person starts the day on a metabolic roller coaster.
So people start the day inflaming their body without even realizing. And this happens with foods we've been taught to see as good, right? Like whole wheat bread, yogurt with cereal, fruit with honey. Everything seems healthy, but isn't always.
That's the danger. There's huge confusion between processed foods disguised as healthy and truly nutritious foods. So-called whole wheat bread can contain refined flours, hidden sugars, chemical additives. Natural orange juice, for example, is pure sugar without the fiber of the whole fruit. And worse, all this is consumed when the body is most vulnerable to absorbing those sugars. The result is high glucose, insulin spikes, and an inflammatory process that starts early and drags on all day.
And this repeats day after day, year after year, until one day a blood test shows prediabetes, high cholesterol, triglycerides off the charts. Then the person thinks, but I don't even eat sweets. But sugar's hidden, right?
Exactly. It's disguised in common breakfast products: breads, cookies, condensed milk in coffee, sweetened granola, breakfast cereals, even milk, which contains lactose, a sugar type. This constant consumption, without enough fiber, good fats, and proteins, leads to silent metabolic overload. And even worse, this breakfast type interferes with cholesterol.
How so? We usually think cholesterol's linked to fat, not sugar. But you're saying what clogs arteries could be toast with jelly?
Yes, that's one of modern metabolic medicine's big revelations. The bad cholesterol, oxidized LDL, rises way more with inflammation caused by sugar than from eating good fats directly. Excess glucose damages vessel walls, causing small injuries. In this scenario, cholesterol deposits to patch the holes. The problem doesn't start with cholesterol, but inflammation, and that inflammation often starts at breakfast.
This changes completely how we think about food. The mistakes at the start of the day, not the heavy dinner. And I bet many people now wonder, so what do I eat, Doc? What do I swap the bread for? What do I drink instead of milk?
That's the right question. The solution is to reclaim breakfast as a real nutrition moment. Ideally, start the day with foods that stabilize glucose and promote fullness. Eggs, avocado, nuts, bitter teas, sautéed greens, even a light broth can be good. In traditional Japan, it was common to have miso soup with seaweed and tofu early. No sugar, no flour, and energy stayed steady all day.
So instead of thinking of breakfast as loading up on sugar, we should see it as grounding, stabilizing the body, right?
Perfect. Breakfast is like a command to the body. Let's function balanced today. If you start with sugar spikes, the body goes on alert, fires insulin, then comes reactive hypoglycemia, and you spend the day snacking, tired, inflamed. If you start with stabilizing foods, the body knows it's safe, and that changes your whole metabolic rhythm for the day. It's a small tweak with a huge impact.
Dr. Haruki, after everything you explained about breakfast and how it can trigger inflammation, I think it's time to talk about another big modern villain, diet and light products. Lots of people who find out they have prediabetes or high cholesterol rush to the supermarket and fill their cart with light yogurt, diet cookies, zero-calorie soda. The intention's good, but do these products really help?
This is a very common trap, and unfortunately, well built by the industry. Terms like diet, light, zero sugar, low fat sound like health promises, but in practice, many of these products are highly processed, full of chemical additives, artificial sweeteners, thickeners, colorings, and emulsifiers. Instead of helping metabolism, they overload the liver and confuse the body's natural signals.
So you're saying that the famous zero-fat yogurt, for example, can be even worse than natural whole yogurt?
Exactly. When industry removes fat, they have to add something to keep flavor and texture, usually sugar, modified starch, or synthetic sweeteners. Also, the food's natural fat helps satiety and stabilizes glucose absorption. When you take out fat and add artificial stuff, the body reacts badly. Blood sugar rises, insulin spikes, and hunger comes back faster.
And what about sweeteners? Lots of people use them thinking they're zero sugar, but still get sugar spikes and sweet cravings. Is this psychological or biological?
There's a very clear explanation. Sweeteners, even calorie-free, trick the brain. When you taste sweetness, the body prepares to receive glucose, activates insulin, primes the liver, and when sugar doesn't come, there's metabolic confusion. Often, this increases appetite, especially for carbs. Some studies show regular sweetener use may even raise risk of metabolic syndrome, weight gain, and insulin resistance.
So people quit sugar but stay trapped in the messed up glucose cycle because their body keeps getting manipulated by artificial flavors, like swapping one trap for another.
Good analogy. And one more thing. Many diet products focus only on removing sugar but ignore the bigger picture. For example, a diet cereal bar might have refined oils, preservatives, and almost no real fiber. Or a zero soda that, although sugar-free, has phosphoric acid, which harms kidneys and blocks mineral absorption. All this piles up in the body, and instead of detoxing, you keep poisoning yourself.
It's like the body never finds peace, right? It tries to recover from one side but keeps getting attacked from another. Then people don't understand why their tests don't improve, even when doing everything right with diet products.
Exactly. The problem is this idea that health control comes from artificial substitution. Remove sugar, add sweetener. Remove fat, add artificial flavor. But real health comes from real food, simple, nutrient-rich, without flashy packaging. When you make a bitter leaf infusion, eat a boiled egg with veggies, drink lemon water, you care for your body deeply. Processed products create an illusion of control, but don't bring real health.
And I think this talk opens many people's eyes. Because deep down, no one wants to depend on labels, right? We want autonomy. We want to understand what we put on our plates, in our cups, in our bodies. And from what you show, the way out isn't in the fitness aisle, but back to nature, to leaves, to the simple.
Exactly. And when we make that return, which is really a leap in awareness, the body thanks us. Tests improve, energy comes back, mind clears. And it all starts with a simple step. Stop believing label promises and start trusting what the earth offers.
Dr. Haruki, one thing that worries me is how many people have messed up glucose and don't even know it. They take a test, get a borderline result, and think everything's fine. But you said the body sends signs before the disease fully sets in. What are those signs? How can you tell glucose is out of control even without an official diabetes diagnosis?
That's crucial. Many people are in a state called prediabetes or metabolic dysfunction, where glucose levels haven't crossed the diagnostic line yet, but the body's already suffering effects. And yes, there are clear signs, often ignored or confused with other problems. The first is excessive tiredness, especially after meals.
Oh, that's common. That post-lunch sleepiness, feeling heavy, sluggish. But we think it's just because we ate too much or had a tough day.
Exactly. But this tiredness, especially after carb-rich meals, may signal the body is struggling with a glucose load. The pancreas releases too much insulin trying to balance sugar, but this effort ends up giving the system a shock, and the person feels that sluggishness. This is a key alert that something's off.
Very interesting. And what's the second warning sign? Something people usually don't link to blood sugar?
The second is increased hunger right after eating, especially craving sweets or carbs. Sounds contradictory, but it's real. The person eats, and shortly after is snacking again, craving bread, cookies, chocolate. This happens because glucose spikes and crashes cause energy instability. The body can't use glucose properly for energy and goes into a constant search for more fuel. This causes compulsive eating and weight gain, especially around the belly.
So that just one more sweet to finish isn't lack of willpower, it's a metabolic sign the body's out of whack?
Exactly. Not laziness or greed. It's messed up biochemistry. And the third sign, which few connect to glucose, is concentration and memory problems. The person struggles to focus, has forgetfulness, feels mentally slow. That happens because the brain depends on a stable glucose supply to work well. When glucose spikes and drops happen often, the brain suffers, and over time, this can lead to more serious cognitive issues.
Wow, that's revealing. Because those three signs, tiredness after eating, constant hunger, and trouble concentrating, show up in many people's lives but rarely get linked to glucose imbalance. We usually just think of excessive thirst or frequent urination, which are more classic diabetes symptoms, right?
Yes, classic symptoms appear when the problem is already established. But we need to recognize early signs, subtle warnings the body gives. And most importantly, don't wait for diagnosis to start caring. Prediabetes is reversible. With changes in diet, routine, and of course, smart use of medicinal plants, it's possible to stabilize glucose and avoid progressing to type 2 diabetes.
It's like the body's asking for help gently at first. And if we listen, there's time to act. Now, doctor, tell me, do many patients come to your office with these signs but no diagnosis yet?
All the time. I'd say most. And when we do more detailed tests, like fasting insulin, glucose tolerance test, or glycated hemoglobin, we see the body's already heading toward insulin resistance. But since basic tests haven't caught diabetes yet, the patient thinks everything's fine. That's why knowing these signs is so important. It empowers people to get help before disease sets in.
And here again, the importance of a natural, preventive approach comes in, right? Using leaves, teas, simple habits to help the body find balance. Because as you say, prevention is always better than cure.
Absolutely. Nature gives us incredible tools for this. And the sooner we start, the easier and more effective it is. No need to wait for diagnosis to change. Just listen to your body. It always talks. The question is, are we listening?
Dr. Haruki, now the talk's going to get a bit tough for a lot of people because we're going to talk about foods that really do harm. Those that, no matter how tasty, are wrecking the body from inside. And worst, they're part of most people's daily lives. Can you reveal the 5 worst foods when it comes to inflammation and metabolic imbalance?
Sure. And it's important to say this isn't food terrorism, but awareness. Chronic inflammation is the backdrop of almost all modern diseases. Diabetes, high cholesterol, hypertension, Alzheimer's, arthritis. And this inflammation is fed every day, often without the person realizing. So the first on the list is an old friend, refined sugar.
That white sugar in coffee, cake, cookies. Is it really that dangerous?
Yes, and no exaggeration. Refined sugar is extremely inflammatory. It causes glucose spikes, overloads the pancreas, increases insulin production, and favors visceral fat buildup, the fat around organs linked to higher cardiovascular risk. Also, sugar feeds bad gut bacteria, worsens immunity, and can even affect mood and sleep.
And it's everywhere, right? Even in savory products, ready sauces, sliced bread, processed meats. People think they don't eat sugar, but do every day.
Exactly. The second villain is refined vegetable oils, like soybean, corn, canola, and sunflower oils. These oils go through intense chemical processes, are too high in omega-6, and highly pro-inflammatory. When heated, they form toxic substances that damage cells, speed aging, and promote artery clogging.
And many still think these oils are healthy. I see labels saying rich in omega, good fat source. But in practice, they're fuel for inflammation.
That's right. The third food to watch is white flour, especially when eaten as bread, cake, pasta, and cookies. Refined flour has a very high glycemic index. It quickly turns into sugar in the blood, causing the same glucose spikes as pure sugar. Plus, it's low in fiber and nutrients. It just fills you up.
So people start the day with white bread, have white rice for lunch, snack on cookies, and keep shooting glucose spikes all day, right?
Exactly. The fourth on the list is processed meats. Ham, hot dogs, salami, sausage, industrial bacon. These have preservatives, nitrites, colorings, and lots of sodium. Besides being pro-inflammatory, they're linked to higher cancer risk, especially colorectal. Excess sodium also contributes to hypertension and fluid retention.
These processed meats are cheap and practical but chemical bombs, and heavily consumed by elderly who live alone or lack energy to cook.
Yes, unfortunately. And the fifth is maybe the most consumed of all: ultra-processed products in general. Anything with colorful packaging, long ingredient lists, highly industrially modified. This includes chips, sodas, sweetened yogurts, artificial drinks, frozen meals. These overload the liver, mess up the gut, and wreck metabolic health.
So, to sum up, the more processed, the more inflammatory. The more natural, the more the body thanks you. But doctor, how to start this cleanup? Because cutting everything at once can be hard for some people.
The first step is awareness. Knowing what's making you sick is half the cure. Then comes smart substitution. Swap refined oil for olive or coconut oil, white bread for roots or fruits, processed meats for homemade dishes, packaged snacks for nuts, seeds, fresh fruit. And of course, add teas and medicinal leaves, which not only fight inflammation but help the body detox naturally.
It's like creating a new plate, huh? A new way of thinking about food. And you realize you can eat well, enjoy it, and still care for your body. You just need direction.
Exactly. Eating is an act of self-care. Every meal can be a step away from disease and toward vitality. And the body responds fast when you stop attacking it. Nature already gave the tools. Just use them.
Dr. Haruki, throughout our conversation, you've often mentioned the power of leaves, roots, teas, and that brings us to this chapter's topic, medicinal plants. It seems like they've been forgotten by modern medicine, pushed to a place almost folkloric. But you state with conviction that they're a powerful key in preventing chronic diseases. What makes medicinal plants so special?
Medicinal plants are actually humanity's first medicines. Before the pharmaceutical industry, people treated their ailments with leaves, bark, seeds, and roots. And they did it very effectively. The problem is that over time, science started isolating active compounds from plants to turn them into medicines, which has its merit, but ended up ignoring the plant as a whole, with its synergy of active principles that work together in a way much more harmonious for the body.
So the whole plant has a more balanced effect on the body than that single active ingredient isolated in a capsule? That's really interesting.
Exactly. In nature, nothing acts alone. When you consume, for example, a bitter leaf like banaba or Japanese myrtle, you're not ingesting just one active compound. You're getting a set of substances that act on different pathways in the body. Some reduce glucose, others fight inflammation, others protect the kidneys, and some regulate the intestines. It's a team effort, quiet and powerful, that respects the body's physiology.
And the curious thing is that despite all this, plants are still seen with suspicion by many. Some say, "Oh, that's grandma's stuff from the wild, no proof." What would you say to those people?
I'd say it's time to look at the data. Today, we have countless clinical studies proving the therapeutic effects of medicinal plants. Green tea, for example, has hundreds of scientific articles showing its metabolic benefits. Ginger, turmeric, olive leaf, the very bitter leaf we'll mention later, all have evidence backing them. And more than that, they have a millenary tradition of use. That's gold.
And can these plants really act in prevention? I mean, not just when the person is already sick, but before that, to prevent the body from getting ill?
Yes, and that's their real power. Prevention. Medicinal plants help keep the body systems balanced, preventing toxin buildup, inflammation increase, glucose imbalance, liver overload. They cleanse, regulate, strengthen. When used consistently, in proper doses and with guidance, they're powerful allies to keep health on track, especially after 50, when metabolism naturally slows down.
And the coolest part is that this kind of care doesn't demand big revolutions, right? Just grow a few leaves at home, brew a tea calmly. It's almost a self-care ritual.
Exactly. I usually say making tea is an act of presence. You boil water, choose the leaf, wait for the infusion, smell the aroma. That time already starts healing. because it breaks the hectic rhythm of the day and reconnects you to your body. Plus, many of these teas taste bitter, and bitterness, which is so rejected today, is a medicinal taste par excellence. It stimulates the liver, improves digestion, regulates glucose. Rescuing bitterness is rescuing wisdom.
And we realize it's not just about physical health. There's something emotional, energetic in this process. It's like the plants help the body, and also the spirit return to the center. And that's hugely valuable nowadays.
Without a doubt, health is integral, and medicinal plants act on multiple levels. They don't replace medicines in all cases, but they can reduce the need for them, improve test results, and, more importantly, give people back their sense of autonomy, that they can take care of themselves with awareness, wisdom, and simplicity. That's the real path to longevity with vitality.
Dr. Haruki, you just mentioned bitter leaves, and I confess that made me even more curious. Because for many, bitter taste is almost a punishment, something we try to avoid on the plate. But you defend that this taste is exactly what the body needs most, especially when we're talking about diabetes, cholesterol, and inflammation. What's the secret of bitter leaves?
Bitterness is the most medicinal taste there is. In Eastern tradition, it's linked to the fire element and the heart, and has a very specific function: cleansing and balancing. Bitter leaves stimulate liver functions, help digestion, activate bile, reduce excessive absorption of sugar and fat, and promote a more alkaline and less inflammatory internal environment. In other words, they're true natural metabolic modulators.
And what would be examples of these bitter leaves? Some we know by name, but don't always know what they're for, and much less how to use them.
Sure. Some of the most powerful bitter leaves include carcaja, artichoke, jurabiba, boldo, dandelion, morina, and, of course, the leaf we'll reveal later in this episode, a plant used for centuries in Japan and that has shown impressive results in recent studies. These leaves work on several fronts. They cleanse the liver, reduce blood sugar, improve intestinal transit, reduce swelling, and help lower oxidized LDL cholesterol.
Sounds like a complete medicine, but coming straight from nature. And one thing that caught my attention, you said they balance the body, not force a reaction like medicines do. That changes everything, right?
Exactly. The power of bitter leaves is in subtle intelligence. They don't force the body to do anything. They signal, invite the body to regain its own self-regulation ability. That's why side effects are almost non-existent when well used. Unlike medicines that overload the liver or cause dependence, these plants strengthen liver function, improve insulin sensitivity, and, over time, promote systemic de-inflammation.
That makes me think how we forgot how to deal with bitterness. Since childhood, we're conditioned to seek sweet, salty, and bitterness became a forbidden taste. But maybe that's exactly what we're missing to get back to balance, right?
Without a doubt. Human taste was shaped by industry to prefer addictive flavors, like sugar, salt, and flavor enhancers. But in nature, bitterness has a fundamental role. It activates digestive enzymes, cleanses the blood, helps metabolize toxins. When we include this taste in the routine, even in small doses, like a bitter leaf tea on an empty stomach or before meals, the body responds, and responds very well.
And has science already proven these effects? Or are we still talking about traditional wisdom?
Fortunately, science is catching up with this wisdom. Today we have studies showing bitter leaves reduce inflammatory markers like high-sensitivity CRP, improve glycated hemoglobin levels, decrease liver fat, and promote insulin sensitivity. Extracts of some of these plants are even being studied for Alzheimer's prevention because of their impact on systemic inflammation and glycemic control. We're just beginning to understand the depth of these plants.
So including a bitter leaf daily might be one of the simplest and most powerful steps for those wanting to control glucose, clear arteries, and live more vital lives. And best of all, it's accessible, right? No pharmacy or prescription needed.
Exactly. Nature is generous. Many of these leaves grow in backyards, farmers' markets, vacant lots. They're within everyone's reach, but require something modern medicine forgot: time, consistency, and respect for natural processes. It's not a single dose that changes your life. It's regular use, listening to the body, daily care. And that, yes, transforms.
Dr. Haruki, now we get to a part one love, and I'm sure those listening do too, real food. You're from Japan, a country known for longevity and a simple but wise cuisine. What traditional Japanese recipes do you recommend for those wanting to naturally lower cholesterol and still eat well?
This is one of my favorite parts too. Traditional Japanese cuisine is very rich in functional foods. Not fancy recipes. On the contrary, simple everyday dishes but with very smart composition. A great example is miso soup with tofu and seaweed. It's light, rich in natural probiotics, plant proteins, and minerals like iodine, which helps hormonal regulation and fat metabolism.
Just hearing that makes me want some. It's a comforting dish, right? Brings comfort, nutrition, and helps the body work better. But why is miso so special in this context?
Miso is a fermented soybean paste, very traditional in Japan. Because it's fermented, it's full of beneficial bacteria that help gut health. And when the gut is healthy, cholesterol tends to balance too. Also, miso contains compounds that reduce fat absorption in the intestine and help break down fatty plaques in arteries. Thanks to enzymatic action it stimulates.
For those who can't find miso easily in Brazil, is there any possible substitute or some reliable place to buy it?
Nowadays, you can find miso in natural product stores and Asian markets in big cities. It's important to choose miso without additives and preferably organic. But if you can't find it, we can use similar functional ingredients, like a vegetable soup with leek, ginger, and natural soy sauce, which also help digestion and circulation.
Great. And you mentioned seaweed. That's also uncommon here, but it has a strong reputation, right?
Yes. Seaweed is highly nutritious and functional food. Wakame seaweed, for example, has a fiber called fucoxanthin, which helps lower LDL cholesterol and improves insulin sensitivity. They also contain antioxidants that fight inflammation and help detox the body. A seaweed salad with cucumber and sesame, seasoned with rice vinegar, is an excellent and very simple side dish.
Wow, that must be delicious. And what about rice? Because rice is a staple in Japanese diet, but here in the West it's looked at with some caution. What's your take?
The difference is in the type and consumption method. In Japan, traditional rice is brown or semi-brown Japanese rice, which has more fiber and is eaten in small portions, usually with vegetables and light proteins. The problem isn't rice itself, but quantity and combination. A plate of refined white rice with fried food and soda is totally different from a bowl of brown rice with grilled fish and steamed veggies.
Makes perfect sense. And this shows that the recipe to fight cholesterol is more about the plate's balance and composition than cutting one or another food. Could you leave a practical Japanese menu suggestion for those wanting to care for artery health?
Sure. A simple and effective example would be a small bowl of Japanese brown rice, a grilled fish fillet, like sardine or salmon, a bitter leaf salad with sesame lemon dressing, and a portion of miso soup with tofu and green onion. For dessert, a slice of papaya with green tea. It's tasty, light, functional, and totally focused on metabolic health.
It's amazing how well-guided simplicity can become treatment. Eating wisely, with intention, changes everything. And the coolest part is knowing these recipes are part of a care culture that spans generations.
Without a doubt, eating is a sacred act, and traditional Japanese cuisine teaches this masterfully. Less excess, more presence. Less hurry, more connection with what goes on the plate. And when that becomes a habit, the body responds, with less cholesterol, less glucose, and more life.
Dr. Haruki, we've reached one of the most awaited moments of our talk. Since the episode started, you've mentioned special leaf, a plant that has helped thousands control diabetes and cholesterol. Now, I need to ask directly, what leaf is that? And what has science discovered about it?
The leaf I refer to is Morus alba, popularly known as white mulberry leaf. It's been used for centuries in traditional Japanese and Chinese medicine, but only recently started being studied more deeply by modern science. What makes this plant so special is its multiple action. It acts on glycemia, cholesterol, inflammation, and even hormonal health. And best of all, in a safe, natural, and accessible way.
White mulberry leaf. I confess I've heard of it, but had no idea it was so complete. What exactly does it do in the body? How does it act on glucose and cholesterol control?
White mulberry leaf contains compounds like DNJ, which inhibit enzymes responsible for carbohydrate digestion. This means it helps reduce sugar absorption in the intestine, preventing glucose spikes after meals. It also contains flavonoids like quercetin and rutin, which have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects, protecting blood vessels and helping balance cholesterol, lowering LDL and raising HDL.
So it's a plant that works both on cause and symptoms. And what do clinical studies say about it? Are there solid evidences?
Yes, and they're very encouraging. A study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry showed that regular consumption of Morus alba tea significantly reduced postprandial glucose levels in pre-diabetic patients. Another study in South Korea followed patients with metabolic syndrome and saw improvements in lipid profiles and blood pressure after 12 weeks of continuous use of the leaf extract.
Impressive. And the best part is knowing this is accessible to many. We're talking about a leaf, a tea, not some expensive or inaccessible treatment. But tell me, doctor, why do you call this plant miraculous? What have you seen in your patients?
I use that word carefully, but I've seen results that truly surprise. Patients who came in with fasting glucose above 140 and after 3 weeks of daily use of the leaf were back to normal values. Others with LDL cholesterol over 200 who, combining the leaf with balanced diet, reduced levels by 30% without statins. Of course, each body reacts differently, but the patterns are consistent, and that shows the power of this plant when used wisely.
And do you think science will discover more about it? Because it seems like we're just starting to explore Morus alba's full potential.
Definitely. Research is just scratching the surface. There are ongoing studies investigating the leaf's effects in preventing diabetes complications like neuropathy and retinopathy. Others assess its impact on gut microbiota, which is directly linked to metabolic health. The future of herbal medicine is increasingly promising, and plants like this will be protagonists.
And the coolest thing is seeing all this comes from nature, from ancient wisdom now being validated by labs. It's like modern world is finally turning its eyes to what's always been there.
Exactly. White mulberry leaf is a living example of how tradition and science can walk together. It represents the best of both worlds, ancestral knowledge and modern proof. And when the patient understands that, they become the protagonist of their own health. No longer just dependent on drugs, they start to cultivate, prepare, observe, and feel real effects in their own body.
Dr. Haruki, we just learned in depth about Morus alba's powers, the famous white mulberry leaf, and the studies proving its incredible effects. But now I want to get straight to the point. How can people use this leaf daily? Because it's not enough to know it works, you have to apply it. So, how to turn this plant into a practical ally against diabetes and cholesterol?
That's the most important question of all. Knowing isn't enough. You have to practice. White mulberry leaf can be used very simply, and the most common way is as tea or infusion. For this, just 1 dessert spoon of dried leaf or 2 of fresh leaf per cup of water. Boil the water, turn off the heat, add the leaf, cover, and let it infuse for about 5 to 7 minutes. Drink preferably on an empty stomach or 30 minutes before main meals.
So it's that tea that prepares the body, right? Already telling the system, hey, let's balance that sugar and fat. Laughs. And how many times a day do you recommend drinking it?
Ideally, for beginners, twice a day. Once in the morning on an empty stomach, and once in the mid-afternoon, which is when the body tends to have glycemic fluctuations. Over time, you can adjust frequency based on how the body responds. The most important thing is regularity. No point taking it 1 day yes, 3 days no. The body needs consistency to reprogram metabolic patterns.
Does a person start feeling effects right away? Or is it something built over time?
Depends on the person's body state, but generally many patients report changes within the first weeks. Less sweet cravings, more energy, better sleep, and even improved bowel function. Lab tests usually show significant improvement after 3 to 4 weeks of continuous use, especially when the tea is combined with a light, natural diet, as we talked about.
Now, tell me something a lot of people wonder. Does the leaf need to be fresh, or can it be dried? And is there a difference between buying it at the market, growing it at home, or buying capsules?
Great question. Fresh or artisan-dried leaves better preserve active compounds. Growing at home is ideal. You control origin and freshness. But not everyone can do that, so dried versions bought at trusted natural stores work well too. Capsules are practical, but should be used with guidance, because dosages vary. And it's always good to check the composition. Many capsules have blends that dilute effectiveness.
So the more natural and close to the original plant, the better. Any contraindications? Anyone who shouldn't use this leaf?
Generally, it's a safe plant, but pregnant or breastfeeding women and people on hypoglycemic or anticoagulant meds should consult a professional before starting use. Since it regulates blood sugar, it can potentiate some medications. And of course, it doesn't replace any prescribed treatment. It's an ally, not an immediate substitute. The key is integration and responsible use.
Doctor, I confess, after all we talk about, I'm convinced. White mulberry leaf is a true gift from nature. But more than that, it's an invitation. An invitation to reconnect with the body, with the earth's wisdom, and with daily care.
That's exactly the spirit. The leaf is a tool, but the true protagonist is the patient. When they decide to care for themselves with consistency, love, and knowledge, results come. And with Morris Alba's help, this path becomes lighter, more effective, and more natural. Just take the first step and keep the pace. The body does the rest.
And if you want to keep receiving the best videos for your health, subscribe to the channel, because it exists for one reason: to make you a healthier person with better quality of life. Helping you is my mission. In the video appearing now on your screen, I reveal what happens to your health if you eat avocado every day for 30 days. Click on the screen and check it out.